So, why you?
Okay. Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
First of all, I just want to say that thanks for having me. For your those who Anthony manages your seafood, he's a good friend. For those of you that Aaron is your seafood, he's a good friend. And this is about family. Okay. So me hanging out today with you all is about family relationships and us spending time together. So I'm happy to share with you all. As you all know, I started training in '83. I spent a lot of time from the late 80s to the 90s up in New York, hanging out with a lot of the company brothers. So Eddie Lugo is here from Florida, and I encourage you all to get to know him, because one of our primary reasons for being out here is for you to make these relationships. Had I not made these relationships, there was no opportunity to sit down and talk with you. And so we are a family-based martial arts system, so we have to have multi-generational relationships. So if you haven't had a chance to talk to Eddie, take the chance to talk to Eddie. And is Renee around here? Oh, and this is my student Renee. He comes around often on occasion. So also make the time to stay, hang out and say hi to him. Get to know each other. Okay. So Sifu Aaron asked me to talk a little bit about Chi Sao. And so some of you may have seen a discussion that we had about the concepts of Chi Sao and how they work. Tate, you and I worked together before, so why don't you come up? Okay. So we talked about the basics, and we're going to do some basic concepts, and then we're going to do some more advanced concepts of sensitivity awareness as your Chi Sao levels develop. So let's start from there. So the beginning in your Chi Sao, let's start from here. Okay? So you must have a good structure, right? So you must make sure that if you were to see yourself, your head, you see my ears are aligned with my shoulders. Shoulders are aligned with my hip. And if you saw my hip, it would go through the middle of my ankle to the floor. Okay? So you can't be here, right? You can't be here, right? For me. And by the way, let me say this to you. All of our Wing Chun is the same conceptually. So our conceptual theory is good horse, centerline, relaxation. We can all agree, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're talking about application theory, my application and interpretation of the system as I've experienced it over the years. So this is not a discussion to say that my way is better or worse, which of course I'm not doing. It's a discussion to say my application theory that I've developed over the years. And so with anything, you're free to use some or not use some as you see fit. So for me, my structure must be aligned. And so my alignment is here, my toes are slightly in. When we play our Selam Tao, of course, we're here, okay? This is a training stance, right? It's very stable, but it's not very mobile. So when we get ready to actually work out, you see how my horse stance becomes more relaxed. So it allows mobility. So when you look at your stance, you should be, from your shoulder to your foot, they should be pretty much in line on both sides, okay? So if you're here, this is a great stable stance, but it doesn't allow a lot of mobility. If you're here, this is a very mobile stance, but it's not very stable. So you're supposed to, as I understand it, have a stance that is relatively mobile and then create stability out of that stance. You follow me? So how do we create stability? We create stability by how our structure is aligned. So you have to be in the right width of your stance. This part of your body has to come forward and stay tucked under, so your core has to be strong. We used to call it a midsection. That's how old I am. But now you guys call it a core. So your core has to be strong because you have to be able to hold this position. So your body feels like this. This is my waist down. This is my upper body. So my upper body feels like it's sitting on my core. So my stance starts here. And then when I move, my core moves me. It's not my head moving me this way, which is our normal walking position. Or it's not just my leg moving me, it's my normal walking position. It's my core that moves me. So from here, my core moves me. You follow me? So this feeling of being touched stays in my body throughout all of my movement. So this is important because this sets up everything else that's going to happen in your chi sao movement. So this allows you to move your body properly for your chi sao. So now that you got this in line, you must be in a position where you're a fist to a fist and a half away from your body. When your hands roll, you see my wrist? They roll on the same plane. Okay? Not this. Okay? Because if you're playing in a real situation, you'll never be able to recover this movement back. Right? So he punches at me. He can't move away from me. Right? Because what's going to happen if you move away? Okay? See, he can't move from me. All right? So we're not fighting, but we're having fighting energy in our hands. Okay? So even if, say, he's stronger than me and he punches at me and he comes in on me, well, you're going the wrong way now.
Sorry.
But go back, right? Punch at me, and he's coming through. Keep going. You see? All he's going to do is move my structure. Okay? And why does he do that? Punches and keeps moving my structure. That allows me my movement. Okay? So I don't have to be stronger than him. I have to be aware and move with him. You follow? Okay? So we're in our structure, so hold on a second. So our hands are even. We roll even here. And for lack of a better way of explaining it, if you look at this, you can almost see my hand is like probing the air. Okay? So that's the feeling that you have. You're probing what's going on around you the whole time. And so my hands want to be in this plane. So something happens to my hands to move them off of that plane. It's sending me a signal as to how I'm supposed to respond to that movement. So when I touch him, right, and what's happening is, and again, one other thing I'll share with you from my perspective. When we play Chi Sao, Bang Sao is a block, Tan Sao is a block, Fuk Sao is a block. So for me, I prefer to see the block fully executed on every roll. For me. So when I roll with you, I am blocking with you because you punch at me. I got to block that line. Okay? So the feeling I generate in Chi Sao is the same feeling I generate in a real situation. Okay? You punch again, I got to block the line. Okay? Same feeling. I have no different feeling in my body for my Chi Sao exercises or any other of the exercises or my fighting. It's the same feeling in my body. So, for that reason, when I roll, I have to fully execute the blocks each time. Okay? And so my hands are in the right spot for the right reason. Now, we are fist to a fist and a half away, and we're rolling, and we're wrist to wrist. Okay? So, from that position, stand taller. Okay? I've explained to him before, you play your body structure. You don't bend your knees lower for a person or stand taller for a person. Your structure is bent knees here, and then your hands adjust if the person is taller, or your hands adjust if the person is lower. You don't bend down to try to get to that person because you've unstructured yourself and you don't want that. So stand tall and then make your Kung Fu work from that perspective. So we're here, and then from this position, there's some contact pressure that occurs that is sending you a signal. And so you want to pick up that signal, and that signal, so he keeps leaving me with the contact pressure. So you notice that I have to keep coming into his boundaries because he can't leave me. So you either got to stay, or I'm going to have to keep coming into you. Okay? Because you got to stimulate the same thing in a real situation. Right? So what we're doing today is a little connectivity between real-time application and your Chi Sao. Right? So you punch at me, right? This is what happens. Okay? And this moment in time, you can't leave it, right? So if he comes through, I let him come through. I just can't leave that hand. You follow me? What can't happen, he punch at me, and then I can't do this, okay? So I have to stay here. So I have to stay here, because otherwise I don't have a transferable skill. So we're here, and so once we're here, the blocks set up the execution of the technique, right? So in the beginning, you know how to do block? Okay. So in the beginning, my sensitivity is kind of weak. So you lock. So I have bang sa wu sa. Within the context of movement, a double block is the least sensitive move, or you have no idea what they're going to do, so you have to cover the line. The next sensitive move, most sensitive move, is a block hit, and the last is just a hit that blocks at the same time. So within the context of movement, as you understand your sensitivity training, right? So we're here, and he comes in and he does a lop sao. Okay, go ahead and do your move. Okay, so this is where I end up at because my sensitivity is light. Okay, we haven't rehearsed this, right? So now our sensitivity got a little bit better. You understand? So we're going to slow it down so you can see this. So you go in to lock me, so I pick it up late, so I have to do a double block. You with me? Okay. So now my sensitivity gets a little better. So now I can pick him up with a pajang, a jatdar, a lapdar, and I can block and hit. Okay? So it comes in again. Then I can catch him even as he twitches. Did I catch him? Okay? So there are levels of sensitivity in your training. So as you train, what I'm showing you now is how to begin developing your sensitivity. So you don't just chi sao. So we're here, we got all the conditions set, right? So now you have a partner, and again, your Sifu has explained, you have a Si-Hing, Si-Dai relationship, and you can create it artificially back and forth. So as we chi sao, you say, do lop sao on me, right? And go ahead, just do your lop, power through, right? Again. Okay? So you have him do that, and you're learning to make yourself get to your bang sao wu sao position. Again. Okay? Every time. You see the power in it, right? Okay? So then, lop, you learn to do the next move, the next level of sensitivity. So how do we get there? We slow it down. Okay? So now you're going to do lop. You got to learn to slow it down. Okay? Again, slow it down. Now, interestingly enough, again, when you bang sao wu sao, you don't necessarily have to move. Okay? When you do your next move, you see the step? Because I have to be in range to hit. Okay? So as you get more advanced, as he comes in, you see? You see the step? Okay? So, every time, right? It's automatic. And so now, you can take your body with your structure and you go into its boundaries. Okay? So how you hit him is almost irrelevant. He feels you coming into his structure, correct? Okay? So that's your second stage. And then your last stage is where you feel him as he twitches to make the move. Right? You follow me? Now, to actually make your Kung Fu work well, you've got to get that level of sensitivity in your hands because you want to be able to pick up on your opponent's move early. So you punch at me, right? So I'm late. I saw he was doing something. I got to stop myself from getting hit. So you see, this is the lower level of sensitivity, right? Punch at me, right? No, don't punch away. You got to punch at me, right? You see here, right? Again, punch at me. Okay, you see? So my sensitivity is higher. This is that pak dar or pajang approach to hitting the person. You follow me? And then punch it again. Okay, you see? There. Okay, right? Now, you saw him touch me because I didn't want to hurt him, right? Had I extended through, that punch would have never touched. Okay, you agree? Okay, so the nature is he punches, okay, here, okay. So we show it this way because we don't want to extend through and actually hurt our training partner. So within the context of fighting, again, he punches, I have this, right? He punches, I have this, right? And he punches slower, because I'm going to punch through this now, right? He punches, and I have this. Now watch when you punch, you notice you went to my hand. And this is important. When you start training with somebody and you work in an exercise, at some point along in the exercise, since you know what you're going to do, they start punching like this, right? That's never going to happen in reality. So it's important that you actually make sure your training partner punches correctly. So you punch at me, okay? He's got to punch at you, okay? So the punch comes at me, then I can block properly. You follow me? Okay. So these are levels of sensitivity in your training. It's very important because if your sensitivity levels are staying at this level, again, block, and you're here, it's not wrong. It's just that you're not accessing so much more levels of your Kung Fu. Okay? So you want to be at a level of sensitivity that, let's call it for lack of a better way, suppression Kung Fu. So that when the person attacks you, you can take the movement from your opponent and suppress that movement and execute your move. At your highest level, he's supposed to do his worst, and you can choose whether or not you're going to hurt him or not. Okay? At your highest level. So when we chi sao, right, and he decides to come in on me, you see, his twitching tells me already, right? So I don't have to do anything because you already know, correct? Okay? So at your highest level, right? Okay? You see? It just doesn't matter. Okay? Again and again and again. Okay? Okay? You see? So this is the nature of it. Okay? Where are you punching? I don't care about you punching. Just so you guys know, I'm 64 years old, and it's okay. Okay? So, now, to do this, there's certain things you got to be able to do. A lot of times you will want to just punch like this, right? So you don't have an agreement with your opponent that you actually could have shut down their technique. You got to be able to go in just like that on every level that you want to get in on. Just touch here, touch more here if you want to do it. With any movement that you want to do, you got to be able to come into your opponent's boundaries and put a touch on them so they can agree that you could have hit them. So it's an ability to develop. How do we do that? First, you're totally relaxed. You come in and just touch them. Just touch them. Okay? And then eventually, you can get in to where you can be here. You got to be able to do that because then if you wanted to, you can be here, okay? It still didn't hurt him, right? But you got to be able to have an agreement that the technique could work in real time under real situations, okay? I suggest that this is more of a yin fight than a yang fight. You all familiar with yin and yang concepts? Okay, so this is more of a yin fight. So yin fights don't require strength. Yang fights require more strength. So if he punches at me, see, again, punch straight, then I don't worry about that movement, right? Punch again, but if I'm going to be hard, then you got to be a stronger person, right? So most women are not stronger than the person they're fighting, right? So when he punches at me, I have to listen to what he's doing, okay? You follow me? Punch again. I have to listen to what he's doing, you see? So this movement doesn't require a lot of strength. You follow what I'm saying? So you want to, as you learn to fight, you got to learn where the yin line is. So there are a couple of places that you can go. Punch slower. I can go to here. Again, work on making sure your punch goes straight. I can go here, okay, and I'm on this line, okay? So we have sensitivity training, so I'm aware of where he is, right? So then as he tries to come back in to hit me, right, come in, right, you have to step away and come back into his boundary again. So if he comes in to try to hit me again, I step away and I hit him again, okay? he comes in to try to hit me again, you see? You see how this works? So this is how I would suggest, as a female, as you want to fight somebody who's stronger than you, how you move in and out of their boundaries and their attacks. Okay? So the punch comes, here, here, come back with another punch, here, here, you see? But you notice the structure was here, so it doesn't really require even a lot of effort. So as a woman, when you're fighting, which is the way the Wing Chun system is designed, we all agree, we don't have to say whether it was really a true story or a myth. We can say that it was a story about a stronger person getting beat by a person not as strong. We can agree on that, right? So we can agree it was not a direct strength-on-strength attack. Agreed? Okay. So when the person comes in on you, you have got to be able to do this kind of a movement. What happened in slow motion was he comes in, and as he comes in, I change the line. And I let him have the line he wants. He can put all the power there as he wants to, okay? Because I don't need to be on that line. So he comes in to attack me, I give him that line, and then I hit him, okay? And then when he comes back on the next line, punch through, right? I give him that line. And when he comes back, punch through, I give him that line, okay? So this is what your movement will look like as a woman fighting a guy that's stronger than you, right? So he punches back through again. Okay, you follow me? So the only thing that's different here is he would not complete his technique because we've talked about how the contact would occur. So in the middle of this, you get one of those. Okay, felt that a little bit, right? Okay. Okay, and so at some point he will either change his mind or walk away or something different, or you're finished. But your footwork has got to keep you constantly moving in and out of his boundaries. Okay. And then so you understand, for us, stand here, so we don't need this to hit somebody, right? If we're here, right, right, and that's just a half of a punch, even less than that, a 3/4. You feel the compression? I still feel it on the inside, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's the nature. So for us, what we're doing is he punches at me, right? I'm coming to here. I just want to get here. I've locked him down on the legs. I've locked him down here, and now I own him. See, even now you don't want me to push anymore, right? You see? Follow? Because I own him, because from here I can compress and move him back. So after about 3 or 4 of those, then it's okay. So as a woman, if your structure is in place and you develop this, you have the ability to do this, let's call it an energy transfer. So his body is a closed system of energy. So when you do this, you put energy into his body. You still feel it? Okay? Yeah. So you put energy into his body, and then his body has to figure out what to do with it. So that's the nature of Chi Sao. So you must have a solid structure. You must keep your hands at the same spacing from your body, rotating together. You must hit the blocks, right? And then you must be able to flow with what your opponent is doing. So it's not that you can't do a yang fight. You guys are familiar with Dorien, right? So we know we line up Dorien to Dorien. And you know where all the vitals of the body are close to the centerline, correct? So for me, you say, well, why do you go to the side? It gives me a choice whether I have to do damage or not. So he punches at me, right? And I go here. I can do things that don't necessarily do major damage to his body, okay? So if I'm here and he punches at me and I go here, see, I have no choice. My body is exposed now. So now I have to go in and do damage. I have to do damage. I have to do a lot of damage down his line. Because if I miss, then I get hurt. So if you ask me the question, then why do you go to the side? For me, the reason I go to the side is I choose to whether or not I have to do a lot of damage or not. Okay? So if he comes in and he punches from here, I can go here, I can armbar him down, right? I'm good, right? He's in here, he punches at me. I'm here, I can choke him and pull him back, I'm good, right? There's no damage that I have to do. If he comes in and he punches at me and I'm here, I have to do damage. Okay? I have to do damage. I have to do damage. I have to do damage. I don't have a choice. Okay? So as you train, you have to know where you are and what your options are based on the circumstances. Okay? So in your Chi Sao, you are changing the line or controlling the line throughout. And you're trying to develop these higher levels of sensitivity. So if your opponent attacks you, right, and you know you're doing a double block, you have to say to yourself, I know I should be able to do something that allows me to hit at the time that I finish my block. So if I'm in a double blocking situation, for me, then you know you're at your lower level of your sensitivity training. So this is where you have to push your own Kung Fu to say that how can I find a way that I can block and hit at the same time? Because that's the nature of Wing Chun. So whatever you're doing, if you're double blocking, right, then that is your lowest level of your ability to protect your body, right? Again, lowest level, right? So comes in again, easy, right? Because you're sensing what he's doing, and it allows you to get in, okay? So that's kind of a primer on Chi Sao and how I perceive it and how you're supposed to train it and how you're supposed to develop. And so every class you come in, you use your Sifu's instruction, the Si-Hing, Si-Dai relationship, and you cultivate your sensitivity. You cultivate your stance, you cultivate your structure, you cultivate your awareness of where your body dynamics are, because that becomes a reference point. And as your Sifu has mentioned to you a few times, minimize the talking, because the most important thing that you're doing is you're cultivating your mind, because you have to have a certain mindset that when you actually access your Wing Chun. So let's end that for the Chi Sao session. Thanks, Tay, for working out with me.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions about anything? Sure.
You mentioned Dorien.
Dorien.
Could you elaborate with that?
Dorien is your center line. So
okay.
For the Wing Chun family, we face our opponent with our center line.
Gotcha.
So it's a very good question. So because for me, I face with my center line until I'm in touching range, okay? Because we have a saying that we occupy the center line, correct? So when I'm in range, I occupy the center line in the lower gate and the upper gate. So when we're here and we're out of range, I square up because I don't know what he's going to do, okay? As he comes into my boundaries, I'm going to occupy the center line with my lower gate, and my upper gate is still square, right? So you see this in your Qigong exercises, where how do you access Qigong? Where you got to occupy your center line so your leg is in play for you to use your Qigong concepts, okay? So when I see somebody coming in on me, right, my first move is I'm going to occupy the center line, lower gate, and the upper gate. Okay? So my center, my Dorien, stays on my opponent, but it's square on my opponent when I'm out of range. But when I get closer into my opponent's boundary, or he gets into mine, I occupy the center line with my lower gate, but my center up top stays on my opponent. Your ultimate goal, because of what we discussed earlier, is to get your opponent's Dorien off of you and keep your Dorien on him. So what happens is when he moves on me, my Dorien stays on him. Okay, as opposed to move again, this and then this, okay? That's two movements. You want one movement. So when he steps, I have to be here. So my center never comes off of him. So your Dorien, your center, you always want on your opponent. So it's a very good question, because if you want a cue to let you know if your movement is correct, if in any way possible you move and you're here, right? We're not talking about right or wrong anymore. We're just talking about what part of the system you're going to access. You have a BOG situation because your center's off of your opponent. Okay? So you got to know where you are. So when your opponent comes in on you, you have to keep your center on your opponent. Okay? And that's whether that means to do it properly. He punches at you. I have to occupy the center line as he powers through, and then I can keep my center on him. It just doesn't matter how it happens. Okay? But you have to keep your center on your opponent. And so if you're not doing that, then you need to train harder, because that's a key component of what you're doing. All of your forms, right? When you play your Selim Tao, right? Everything is squaring you off. This is the back of a gun sight, for lack of a better way of saying it. This is the front of a gun sight. So you're training all of your hands to go to this spot, right? And then you start fighting, and now you're going to train them this way, where naturally your hands want to go here. So your training and your forms is not going to be accessed in a real situation. So you have to keep your center focused on your opponent, your doyen focused on your opponent. So you have to train that, because I think we can agree that you want to integrate your forms to your actual chi sao and real application situations. So doyen is your center, and the question is, what do you do with your center? You keep your center on your opponent at all times. Okay. Good. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.